RB Minor,
Here.
Tia Ping,
Here.
Alfredo Moreno,
Here.
Miles Palacios,
Here.
Pradnya Patel. Here.
Certainly. So we are calling this a work session because we definitely wanted to spend a little bit more time with you talking about this replacement bond measure, but we're not actually putting you to work. So we just want to be clear with that up front. This is much more of an information sharing session. But I'm here tonight with Bruce Barbarash, who is our sustainability manager, and we wanted to give you some information. We're going to start out with a little bit of background on the 2008 bond, just to ground you in what we did the last time around, so that you can then hear about what we're thinking. And we wanted to give you an update on our bond task force meeting last week. So we're going to roll through some slides, and feel free to stop us and ask us any questions should you have them, but we'll get this started.
All right. So in 2008, we passed a bond measure, which passed by just a modest margin. If you remember, around that time, there was kind of an economic collapse and a lot of people got nervous, understandably. We polled really well before the vote, and after the vote, we just kind of squeaked by. But the amazing thing was we ended up with $100 million in capital. And in the years following 2008, we were able to do a lot with those funds, in particular, because the economy wasn't great. A lot of contractors of various sorts were interested in doing work for a very reasonable price. So we got out of the gate and we did pretty good. We also refinanced the bond at a certain point, which saved a lot of money. And that was great for taxpayers. So it also allowed us to retire the bond a little bit earlier than expected. We did, these dots on the screen represent the projects in different locations throughout the district and the type of, and I think one thing that's important to note about the bond is we did a lot of new things. It wasn't necessary. We did some replacing and fixing up, but we did a lot of new items. When we look at the 5 categories that we had, you can see the dollar values attached to each one in the slide here. As I mentioned, that the kind of new versus repair replace, it was about 60-40. And then we had a little bit of money set aside for administrative costs, which in the end was probably a bit low. Even though 3 million looks like a lot, it's a small percentage of what it actually took for staff to carry out the bond. And one thing that's important to know is the bond takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of staff time. And when I say staff, it could be accounting staff, finance staff, it could be program staff who are involved in contributing to designs, it could be design and development staff, could be natural resource oriented staff. So there's a whole variety of folks involved in making a successful project in the end. We're really proud of all the things we did, and we over delivered in most of the categories, which was nice. It also meant there's a lot more things that staff get to take care of these days than they would have before. Kind of a summary of successes. We did a lot of things with natural areas and trails. Notably, we connected a lot of sections of regional trail. Prior to the bond, we had lots of regional trail, but it was hopscotch. It was a piece here and a piece there. And afterwards, one of my proudest trail moments is that folks who live north of Highway 26 came up to me and said, "We used to hate your millage rate, it's too high." I said, "Oh, why is that?" "Well, you don't have anything for us." And now they come to me and they're like, "We love the way the trails keep getting connected. We can walk farther and farther," which is wonderful that they notice. We did a lot of things with parks and sports. You can see a pretty extensive list there. And facility-wise, we did a lot of small improvements for recreation, for sports, for aquatics. The most notable was the addition that's pictured here on the right at Conestoga, which is the fitness room. Great light in there, very, very actively used. And we're also excited to say that we're down to the final 1% or less of funds left from the bond. And there's really 3 projects that are almost done. So we're really getting down to the very last bits. Bronson Creek Greenways north of Highway 26. And this was a habitat-oriented project. All the construction there is complete, and we just really have some details relating to planting and other enhancements for wildlife there. Raleigh Park is ostensibly done. This had a lot of stream daylighting and other kind of natural resource enhancements. That is constructed. There's a few adjustments. Just anytime you mess around with water, it has a way of doing funny things that we're going to fix this fall. And then over at Cedar Hills Park, we have a water quality facility that for various reasons had to be moved. And as you can see from this picture, they are constructing that as we speak. They may even be done. They're close. So that's exciting because no one was excited about doing the project, but we're excited to be done with it because ultimately it benefits the community by cleaning the water that comes out of the park before it heads to our streams. And we're hoping to complete all of that spending by the end of this calendar year. So we're really zooming right along with shutting down that 2008 bond. Any questions or comments? Mm-hmm. Yep.
How long is the bond, this new bond gonna last? Is it, because this was 2008.
Yeah, it'd be projected 20 years.
Okay.
And
thank
the only
you.
reason why this one isn't 20 is because
we-
of the refinance.
Gotcha.
And at the time, the board made the conscious choice. They could have stayed with 20 years,
Right.
but it would have been greater interest.
Yeah, I remember that.
They drove the savings to the tax rate.
Okay.
Is the rate still going to be the same, 37 cents on the 1,000 assessed value?
That is our suggestion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move into this next section. So here we are with an opportunity ahead of us for a replacement bond. We talked to you when we were coming forward with the levy ask for your consideration about the fact that that was a tough ask because that was something that was not on the books. It was a brand new ask to continue largely what we were already doing. This is a very different scenario. This would simply be an opportunity to continue that same taxation strategy. So this is no new taxes. What we're asking is that voters would approve the 2008 voter approved bond rate. So the timing is very critical because if you were to wait until everything was done with that 2008 bond, you wouldn't be asking for a replacement. It would be a brand new one again. So we have a window of time now where we can go to the voters and make this request. It might be a slight smidge early, but that has been done and that is totally acceptable to do, to have that in place before your bond rolls off the rolls. So we want to have this opportunity to go in May 2026 before the bond expires. And this also gives us an opportunity, if we weren't successful with the ask in May, we could have the opportunity to go to voters in November of the same year. One of the other opportunities that we're looking at with this bond and how it differs from the 2008 bond is, as Bruce mentioned, that we were slightly more on the new side, that 60-40 split for the last bond. And our data is telling us that we do have a great need ahead of us. We have aging buildings. We hit 70 years old this year. Some of our buildings are that old or older because we've taken on some historic properties over time as well. And we really do have quite a significant backlog of capital repairs that we need a solution for. And we think that this is our best opportunity to meet that need. So this really does, the strategy that we're sharing with you tonight really does focus in on what we also heard from our levy task force in 2023 about finding a solution to take care of what you've got. So with that, we will move into this next section. one of the things we wanted to make clear, and these slides are largely similar to what we shared with the bond task force last week, is that we're not saying there's not going to be anything new, because we have a total separate funding source that allows us to enhance and expand our system capacity, and that's our system development charges. These are the fees that are charged just once when development occurs, and they are limited. They're very restricted in how they can be spent. We cannot replace playgrounds with these dollars. These are to build brand new playgrounds, or to build sections of trail, or to add neighborhood parks, community parks within the district. What the system development charges were intended to do is to make sure that people who are new to a community are buying into the existing framework and infrastructure of your park and recreation system, and to also make sure that they can have a similar level of service within their areas. And so this is a map that is beyond just SDC investment. This is also covering some of our other types of spending, which would include bond dollars from 2008. But the areas that you see on the screen that are circled in red are the ones that were developed using SDC funds. And you'll see that there are a cluster of development up in the north and in the south, all sort of in the same time range. And that was because those are when those areas in North Bethany and in South Cooper Mountain were developing. So you'll see that was our intent, to try and create that network that is similar that you see throughout the district. So all the little greens on the map are our park systems, and you see the trail corridors, and we wanted to provide that similarly in those areas. One thing that is a little bit different in those areas and why you might see more dots is because we are able to acquire land, natural areas, and trail alignments in those spaces. They're often a lot smaller. And so there was a different approach taken with providing parks and trails in those two newly developing areas. We were starting from absolute scratch. There was farmland in both of those areas. And so we had to provide all the infrastructure to put in these new systems. So it represents a pretty significant investment, and one that is completely appropriate for those SDC funds. So this is a chart that we wanted to share with you because we were curious to know what our forecasted costs for capital expenses were going to look like. And we started with looking back to 2015, so the last 10 years, what we had been spending annually on our capital funds. This is not the extent of our capital budgets per year. This is simply the general fund dollars, those unrestricted dollars that make up our capital budget. There are other funds that go into play here. SDC would be on top of those green bars, as would any grant funded projects. And so you see there's kind of a shift. And this is largely because you've heard of our cash carry forward each year. When we have a healthier cash carry forward, we typically have more money to carry forward the next year to do capital work. So you'll have higher contributions to those funding sources. There are some years when we don't have a great cash carry forward, and you'll see from 2020 to 2021, there's a dip there. So what we wanted to look at, and what the yellow bars on the right side represent, are what we think we have ahead of us. And this is based on recent analysis done as part of our facilities functional plan, where we analyzed the top 20 most public facing facilities that we have to see what they need to continue being able to operate safely, to welcome people in. And those numbers are significant. These represent roofs and boilers and HVAC systems, ways to keep our air warm or cool depending on the time of year, and how to make sure that the air quality is maintained within those spaces. And so we know that those bills will be coming due as these buildings continue to be used and loved by our patrons. So what's important to note, though, is that these items in the yellow bars, those are only buildings. That is only structures. It doesn't represent the similar types of analysis we would need on our park side. So all of the playgrounds, all of the playground surfaces, the trail alignments, natural area viewpoints, those are not represented on this, but are also very real costs to us as we continue this process. And again, just looking a little bit further out, we tried to take information from that facilities functional plan to look at what the rough estimates of needs would occur within 5-year buckets going into the future. So this looks out to 2045, and it's a significant amount of funds. And so looking at that and knowing that we have this opportunity for a replacement bond, we really are hoping we can see how much of this we can eliminate and take care of through that funding source, because doing it to the tune of $3 million a year, $4 million a year, it's going to be really difficult to meet all those needs. Very delicate mouse here. Um, so now we want to share with you some real life examples of what we're facing as we look at the different facilities and spaces around the district. And one of the ones that has really risen to the top for us, and one that we're having a lot of conversations about right now, are the security and safety within our spaces, as well as accessibility into our centers. There were some funds allocated in the 2008 bond that allowed us to do seismic solutions for different buildings. And that was really focused on getting people safely into and out of a building in the case of any sort of emergency. But what we do have, and you'll see on this screen, we have Cedar Hills on the left and Garden Home on the right. These are old school buildings built way before the school buildings of today are being built, where they're really focusing in where you access a facility. We have a bunch of different access points. And if you've been to Cedar Hills, you know, if you want to go downstairs and you have a stroller with a little baby that you really don't want to fuss around with, you have to enter from the northeast corner of the building. If you have something to do on the top floor of that building, you have to go all the way around to the south end of the building. And what we really are hoping to see is if there's ways that we can renovate this building, not making huge investments, because this is not a building that our facilities functional plan would tell us to invest a whole lot into because of its age. It will never be the modern recreation center of today. But are there ways that we can enhance security? We can maybe create a space that funnels folks in so that we can welcome them into our facilities. We can ensure that everybody's getting to where they need to be. And we've been able to manage that security a little bit better. And that's the same thing over at Garden Home, where we have multiple entrances to the facility. And is there a way that we can modify this to make it make a little bit more sense for our folks and give that sense of safety? We're caring for people's children's in these spaces, and we want to make sure that they can be as comfortable as possible leaving them in our care. And we think that having that unified location where people enter the building is a great way to do that. All right. Also, with regard to security and accessibility, and truly that accessibility, we have the Turpinning Center here on the left side. And, you know, this is a 40-ish year old building, and this is 40-ish year old concrete. And what we see are things degrading. And it's a lot of concrete. I would love there to be less concrete in this space, I'll tell you that. But we have all of these different assets across the district that are not the best. They are aging, or they are slumping. We have a little example to the right with the level showing that we're not meeting the cross slopes and slopes that we would like to. So this would be another opportunity for us to address some of those concerns across the district.
Aisha, can I ask a question real
Yes.
quick? As far as security of buildings, entrances and things like that, is that something that would mostly be focused on these two older ones, or is there thoughts to kind of look at places like Conestoga and others as well, or?
We're talking about it for all of the
Yeah,
different buildings,
okay.
yes. And so I think where we're able to make the most difference, we
For sure.
hopefully focus our energies there, but it's a concern for all of our
Sure, okay.
facilities. Within our parks, we have, again, beloved spaces where people love to play. And some of the parks you saw on the map that showed SEC and bond contributions are ones that we have out in the community now. But even parks that we developed early in the 2008 bond implementation are getting up to that 20-year mark. We are able to care for these. We have two of our park maintenance techs here inspecting and taking a look at the structure and making adjustments. So we can stretch the life out, and we work hard to do that. But the fact is that they are aging, and we have a lot of them across the district. Out of 120 parks, many of those have this type of play equipment. And there's even some that have play equipment similar to what you see on the right side of the screen, which is not a structure we would implement and build in our parks today. And that might have been like $30,000 to put in years and years ago when it went in. Play equipment installations that we put in today with all of the work to acquire, permit, and install, they're running $300,000 to $400,000 each. That is a very different situation from many, many years ago when we were able to make these playground replacements. Also within parks and in sports fields, we have different things like our natural turf fields and the baseball diamonds, softball diamonds that our folks play on, and they get beat up pretty badly. So one of the concepts we've been looking at is, could we transform the infields, not the entire field, but the area that gets the most wear and tear, could we transform that into synthetic turf? There'd be benefits to that. There'd be potential revenue increases to that. Certainly, we'd have a lot of happy people that don't have rainouts as much. And so that's a idea that we're contemplating. As with the concrete, we have a lot of aging asphalt, and I've tripped through our parking lots myself. And it's something that we know needs some investment. And we do asphalt projects every year. We've always got pathway replacement projects, trail corridor replacement projects. We often have parking areas as well, but these exist across the district and are definitely something that is on our radar. And then, of course, we have the picture on the right, which shows where we've got a trail alignment, and the fencing that is there is sort of starting to slump. So we deal with erosion, we deal with different conditions out in the field that make it so we need to provide a little bit safer passage there, and ultimately that needs a fix, because we want to be able to safely welcome folks into our spaces, and that is not an ideal situation for us.
Based on, like you mentioned, safety, do we have like these facilities between parks and facilities prioritized of what we need to go address first with the budget?
We are working on that process now. In terms of safety and, the condition in that particular picture, we do have safety assessments, and we're able to identify, what is the risk of something failing, how dangerous could that be? And so that guides us making immediate action versus putting it on a capital budget that we're going to get to within the next few years. So here's a few examples of what we see out in our sports facilities. We do have a number of synthetic turf fields currently, and so they're on a schedule. I think when I started, I heard we try to replace the carpet on these every 10 years. We get the most out of that. And so we have gotten past the 10-year mark, but it's always a matter of safety. If we're gonna have trip hazards and we can't repair it, that really guides on how quickly we have to do this. In the middle, you see one of Doug's favorite spaces, one of our tennis courts, that we're able to do some crack repairs. This is the type of crack that, when you start potentially losing a cell phone into that space, a seal of that crack isn't going to work, and you really need to address the underlying grade and reconstructing those courts. I don't think Doug has lost his cell phone in there recently, so that's good news. And on the right side, we just show some lighting from a sports park where they reach their end of life. We need to replace and repair. And we have an opportunity, as we do that now with more guidance through our climate action plan, of maybe making a different choice for the type of lighting that we're using. And so things that we're taking into account as we put these projects forward for consideration are, what is the payback on making that investment? Are there grants that we can go through and secure funding to make that more sustainable choice? So another bit of consideration. And here we just wanted to share a couple of examples of sports facilities and the attention they get, either from Mother Nature on the left side, where you see that was our ice storm and snowstorm last year, where it took out a section of fence there. And then on the right side, in case you were ever curious what repeated strikes of a lacrosse ball against cyclone fencing look like, Cameron Hall, our park maintenance supervisor in the north, has demonstrated that for you. So that is one thing that is on our list on an ongoing basis. We have to care for. We want to keep these spaces safe. There's a reason why there's fences there. We don't want those lacrosse balls going into a family or something like that. So that is something that we have to make sure is cared for.
So I might ask Aisha a question here. Is this an example? And I apologize if this is the next slide. On the left, we intentionally now, because we've had ongoing history of stuff comes up. So we place, as the board is aware, within our budget, $100,000 in emergency repairs. And where are we today?
Well, we're a couple of slides away from exactly that, but there's no reason why we can't talk about it now. We typically have a line item for emergency repairs, and we are through 2 months, almost 3 months into this fiscal year. We're 25% spent because of things that happen. And you'll see some pictures of some of those things that we've spent that money on already this fiscal year. These are not some of those, although I will share with you that the one on the left is one we have been monitoring, and it's one we've actually sought out some funding through federal earmarks for and have not yet been successful, but we're still going. But we are monitoring the different surfaces, our roofs, our metal structures that exist around the district, and we're noting when we've got some issues. And so this is some steel girding that we need to take a look at. And so we've done our studies, we know what the fix is, and we need the funding to do that. Within our centers, we're doing a lot of work that we can in-house. We have a very talented group of building trade techs that, we have our building maintenance techs that sort of care for the spaces as they are. When there's something that we need to change or repair, we've got a team of staff that can go in and they can, troubleshoot electric issues. They can do our HVAC updates. And so we're able to do a lot of that work in-house, but they are increasingly being faced with these bigger ticket items that we don't have an ultimate solution for just yet. On the right side, you can see an example of some initial planning work we've done to find a way to make our restroom facilities at recreation centers, these old school buildings, how we can make those more accessible and useful to our patrons.
I'm just going to interject here. I'm really proud, and I think the staff have the really big sense of accomplishment of like, hey, we keep all these things going. When you walk into Cedar Hills Recreation Center, where we had our bond oversight meeting, it is spotless, it is well cared for, but we also have to recognize it's a really old building and it never will meet the current standards of what we're looking for, but we keep them going and we keep them safe. The playground that you saw the swing set on a few slides ago, 1978, it's still out there, but it's just about the end of its life. And I think that's the kind of big challenges we're getting to. It's beyond what staff can sustain in the short term.
Thank you. So here are some rarely seen things that are, these are the places our patrons don't get a peek behind the curtain at, but these are the systems that are absolutely vital to be able to run our centers. And so we've got things like our system-wide fire alarm system where we're notified when something's going awry at a building. And so that's a key system that has changed and evolved over time. It used to be these were hardwired through landlines, and there's not been support for that. So we've had to make some adjustments and move to a different type of notification system. All doable, but modernization of these systems is really what is needed. In the middle picture, you see a leak that we experienced at one of our facilities after that winter storm. So many days below freezing. Boy, it really does a number on plumbing. And then on the right, we wanted to just share some of the really complicated systems that keep things like our splash pad at Conestoga going. So these are different types of spaces that our staff are in and out of all the time, and that they are not the fun things to spend money on, but they are the absolutely necessary things that we need to fund. And just to share some of these other items, as Doug mentioned, we have a line item in every capital budget each year to address things that happen that we didn't expect, didn't plan for. We had that winter storm, January of 2024, that really caused a bunch of havoc across the district, and we had leaks and water and just a really difficult time throughout the district. On the right side, you can see there was a water line break in the nature park that started bubbling up through the pavers out there. And these are things that you can't let go. You can't wait for another day. So we have to have that funding in place. And when we go beyond that line item that's assigned, and we absolutely did in that fiscal year 24, that means that we have to make some choices about not doing things that we did plan on. So we have to find those funds in our capital budget to address these different types of repairs. We have insurance, and that was able to cover some of the damage that we experienced through the winter storms. Floor replacement at the Stir Center is one example, but there are a lot of things that are not insured, like playgrounds. And so when a tree comes down over a play equipment structure, that's not something we can necessarily go out and replace due to that $300,000 to $400,000 price tag. And just wanted to share some additional projects. We have a number of pools, as you know, and they're all sort of on a reoccurring schedule for things like deck replacement and tank replacement and resurfacing. We have different things like our ceilings that we have to look at and make repairs as those happen. These are harsh environments where you're dealing with pools. And so, we see a lot more corrosion in those areas. We see cracking. And so we're monitoring these all the time and are trying to work them into a schedule of repairs and replacements. Here again is some example one. Well, actually, in both cases, these were completely unplanned repairs or replacements that we had to make. When you have systems that are 40 years old, they sometimes surprise you, and you never know like why something isn't working. You can try scopes, you can try these less painful ways of finding out what's going wrong, but sometimes you have to dig the whole thing out, and then you see. You just be thankful you don't have another angle on that left photo. But it was a much bigger project than we expected. The problem is fixed, and I think that's the most important thing that Sabrina would want you to know. But this is a urinal replacement project that we did not expect. So $25,000. There you go. That's part of your emergency line item that is now gone. And when pumps go down, we have to get those going again, because without the pumps, you can't run the pool. And people love to be in our pools, as you know. So we really want to be able to jump in and get those handled. Is one slowly transitioning PowerPoint. I apologize. I think we're almost to the end of the sad stories that we're sharing with you tonight. But we did want to share some imagery about our trail system. And while we were able to make tremendous strides with both SDC funded and bond funded projects over the last decade and more, we still continue to have this aging system where our boardwalks are reaching the end of the lives. We're dealing with cracks and heaving across the district on these trails. We manage those as best we can. We patch when necessary, or our service providers who are digging up our trail try to patch, and it's not always pretty what's left, but we work with what we can, and we try to do overlays as we're able. But I think just to point out, on the right side, you see a section of Waterhouse Trail, and that's a trail that should be much wider than what you see there to accommodate the kind of traffic that that trail receives. And so one of the things that we would be very interested in doing is really addressing those substandard sections of trails and creating those larger segments that meet our district standard for things like regional and community trails, because we know we've got people out there and they're dodging each other on those nice days. So we think we can do better in that regard. And one last thing about trails, Bruce's team has done a great job analyzing what we've got out in our system. And so we know that we've got areas, and this chart on the left is from our regional and community trails, and it's regarding the width of those trails. So you see that meets standard section is not great. We have areas where a trail exists and it's that 4 foot or 6 foot width. What we want is more of what we see on the right side. And that's not the fanciest picture. This is a recently completed section of trail. So everything hasn't really grown up around it yet. But this is a section of regional trail, the West Side Trail along Walker Road, just at the south side of the HMT complex. And this is what you would expect to see for a regional trail, because you've got folks going in both directions, people riding bikes, people pushing strollers. And so we want to see that meet standard really get enhanced from where we are right now. Okay, here we go. Is there any questions we can answer or anything you want to share with us after taking a look at that series of imagery?
I've got a little question. This is based off of the predicted expenditures piece. Just more of a clarifying question when you were showing us the graph of the green and the orange and everything. That huge spike for 26, 27, is that because we think it is? I'm trying to understand why it spikes so much. And is that partially because of the bond and us having the capital to be able to pay for it, or just because things are aging out?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with money coming in.
Okay.
So I'll let Bruce get into what that tells you, and I'll get you back to that slide.
There's a couple things going on. One is staff have been very strategic about prioritizing. We have this much money and we can do these projects. So a lot of times we're patching a roof instead of putting a whole new roof on, right? And so we kind of extend. It may not be the best way, but we do the best we can with the money we have. That's one part of the equation. The other part is a lot of things are reaching end of lifespan. That's another part. The third part, and the reason we have these orange bar charts, is because we commissioned a study of our 20 key facilities, like our Cedar Hills, our Conestoga, those type of things. And we had a team go in and look at everything, top to bottom, every system in each building. And because of that, they were able to cost estimate a bunch of stuff out. Those are round numbers because they're kind of like, hey, you're going to need to replace this in about this long. Hey, this thing is failing. Hey, in our eyes, you should do this. And these are kind of bare minimums. They had other things. These are what we call sort of what is the title of the next slide? Renewals, right? It's basically, this is what's going to keep you in the same place. This is not, hey, if you want to have a more modern facility, you should do this. But the key thing is, this is the first time we've had a study done outside of staff knowledge. And that's why we're seeing these numbers and going, like, we kind of thought that, but now we know.
So it sounds like I might be getting the actuals of the past confused with the predictions of what's coming ahead.
Exactly. I mean, the reality is, we like to do our best work with the science behind it. And we now have studies of experts in the field that help us figure out that path forward. If you really want to do the repair correct, you should do the whole roof. And by the way, while you're doing that, you should look at all the trusses, and you're going to have some to repair.
So it's an estimate of the need, not necessarily the funding available to meet that need. And so, yes, we would be having to make the choices of, do we go for the full replacement, or are we able to just patch it based on the funding we have available? Were there other questions?
Can I jump? Sorry,
Yes.
Fran, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a piggyback off of what Director Palacios was asking. I think when you say it's a prediction, I bias towards just wanting to be prepared for how the timing of everything goes, right? So I see that and I go, that's a spike in 2026, the same time that potentially we're approving whether or not we move forward with the bond, that those choices of, let's assume there's a shortfall, and we don't approve. Does that then come back to us to be able, those are decisions that the board would then be able to make, to Doug's point of repair the entire thing, just do the whole kit and caboodle, and we would have to rob Peter to pay Paul and make some of those choices?
Well, we do it every year already. So
This is
every
just
capital
visualized in a way
budget,
that
yeah.
gives me a little bit of heartburn.
Well, sure. Well, what I can share with you is that in starting the conversation about what would we need to fix, that's how we came up with this number. I mean, we essentially stopped really counting all the projects after we hit that $300 million mark. We already know there are $300 million worth of repairs that we could make to this system, and that would do some great work. We would really be able to knock some things out and buy us decades more before we have to worry about certain things like boilers and roofs. But we do on an annual basis have to make these choices where we know we can't afford a turf replacement or a turf transition from natural to synthetic. So that's just not on our list, right? That's a great to have. And so that's just gonna not be on our list for this year. But then we have to look at how bad is this roof issue at this building versus this building, and we decide to go here. So we have to make those choices because we only have as much funding as we have to do the work. But this is sort of to give you an image of what could you fund? Like what is a need out there? That's the need. That's a very real need. And we know we don't have those funds. So we have to do some other work.
Holly's got her hand raised behind you, but can I thank you for doing this level of detail. I know that I was a person earlier on in the, who was advocating for, can we get Viz to what that $300 million is?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what is that list? And I think we probably all, each individually have our own thing that's stuck in our craw of like, I can't wait till X or like this thing. But the purview that you all have and the expertise that goes into the costing of those repairs. So thank you for this level of fidelity. I wasn't trying to imply that by seeing that number, holy cow, I asked to know what the number is and what the, in order for us to, for me personally, my decision-making tree, I need to know that holy crow, it cost almost $1 million to do 1 mile of asphalt. Not a fact that I immediately knew, right? So in the conversations that we ultimately know we are going to be having, this kind of detail of looking backwards to say, playground was 30,000, new playground 400,000. Like I can have a conversation with neighbors and community members like that. So thank you for this level of detail. And sorry, Holly, over to you.
No, I just think there's a really important piece of context. Aisha, would you go back to the comparison slide for a second? Which is, Tia, I want to see your face. Remember in April of 24, when I think Doug tried to give me a heart attack, y'all asked, when are we going to go for a bond measure? Yes. And he said 26 and the election was like a month away. And I'm like, what? So remember at that time, he was very public, like we're going to have to go in 26. And that started for us a clock of about 16, 18 months of prep planning. And that's why you've seen an update to all of the functional plans. And that's why we did the facility functional plan. And that is why you have all of this new information. It really is that prep work of knowing the minute we were done with the levy, we needed to go service line through service line through service line to get a really good understanding of what our needs were going to be to put the bond measure together. And that's why when we talk about timing of all of this, I think it's really important to start our story in April of 24 when he tried to give me a heart attack and declaratively stated, we've got to start this work now. And that's why Aisha's team has updated those functional plans. We have these estimates for the first time, because remember, you only do these bonds once every 20 years, 30 years. We haven't gone through this work in nearly 20 years to prepare for the next update. And we've now got this, once every couple of decades level of information to begin the formation of that bond plan. So I think that's an important piece of context that helps. Why do we see these numbers? Why do we see this spike? Because we've been doing the homework to get ready for 26.
Unfortunately, that's just the building spike. That doesn't include sports facilities and trails and other things. Like I look out on the parking lot at Fano Creek Service Center every day. And the thing that goes through my mind, that's $1 million asset right there. Right? When we think about the square footage, and yet you can walk out there and kick gravel off the surface of it because it's falling apart.
But the important part is we don't own that anymore.
I don't care about that either.
So that is not an us problem anymore.
We do own other parking lots that need some help, right? And so we've prioritized some repairs, like we paved ADA accessible parking spaces, so it's easier for folks with disabilities to get in the facility. But those are the kind of choices that we're faced with. And as Holly alluded to, we've been using our plans.
Just want to make sure that.
Oh, yes.
question.
I think you partially answered that, Aisha, but I was going to ask a process question. So you mentioned you have to make some trade-offs. So for the year, was it 2026 that was spiked? If you couldn't do everything, would that then roll over to the next year as projected then?
All the needs will stay on the list until they're not needs anymore.
Mhm.
So,
No, but from a budget, like would you?
well, we do a 5-year kind of projection each
Mhm.
year that we do the budget, thinking of where we're going to slot these different projects in. Some of these are known and have been planned for and are on that list. Some of them are big and therefore not on that list because we really don't have a funding source. If you were to tackle a $2 million roof project, for example, in the coming budget years, that would be 2/3 of your budget, your total capital budget. So those are areas where we're looking to find other funding. We're going out for grants. We're looking at things, at the federal earmark level for, taking care of HVAC issues or other types of things. So uh, we we keep those in mind. And I think one thing that has something we've only been tracking in spreadsheets. And when you have an organization that has as many assets as we do, we're going to reach the end of the Excel spreadsheet. So we need a new solution for that. And that's one thing that Bruce wants to talk about as one of the many tools that we're using to prioritize. We know it's scary to hear $300 million worth of projects are easily out there. But we have a variety of ways that we are trying to hone in on prioritizing those and identifying what we have to tackle first. And so this is the section Bruce is going to talk about.
So
If
one-
I could,
oh,
go ahead.
This was something that Doug related to what you mentioned. So this must-do list or our need list, was that prepared internally, or did you say we had some surveyors also give us inputs and assessment?
Well,
It's been an internal
yeah.
process, and we
For-
hired a team of consultants that took a look at those 20 top tier facilities. So rec centers, pools, the admin building. So we had help, but we've pulled together a lot of this information just based on the capital project items that we evaluate on that annual basis to determine what we can fund.
Yeah, and the other reality is we have a very healthy system. We have a great deal of amenities, and it's not shocking that at some point they become in need of repair. And the challenge, of course, is what I think is pretty remarkable. What Aisha and her staff do is we seldom end up in closure situation. Now, on occasion, we have Five Oaks tennis courts that are locked up. They have cracks that are just they're beyond. Trail systems in components where we have a problem, we've got to shut it down for a while. And sometimes we're waiting for budget dollars, and sometimes we're waiting for solutions to better understand the costs to actually repair that item. But, as good as any staff is at doing this, you reach a threshold when you have a lot of amenities that you just can't overcome the dollars that are pressing into many, many projects.
So our functional plans have mostly been updated at this stage, and the goal of the functional plans, they set standards, they set targets for what staff should be looking for, and that relates directly to our physical assets because we know what we need to rebuild towards or what we need to maintain. These are some draft maps that came out of the functional plan process, and they're showing levels of service. And those circles indicate areas where certain amenities are available. And I bring them up not so much to get into the details tonight, but we certainly could come back, but to show staff have a pretty keen sense of where is the park district well served and where might investments be needed. And that helps us also look at where do new things need to go or where do we need to replace things to maintain those standards. And probably the most critical thing for our discussion tonight as far as finances go is I have been heading up an asset management program with a relatively new staff position as well as existing staff. And what we're doing is creating an inventory of everything the district owns that's worth roughly about $10,000 or more. And what we're able to do is say, where is this thing? What's its current condition? What's its timeline for replacement? And this is a really simple example, but this is just looking at benches and ADA access. And so we have this really good sense in the big picture of where is work needed in parks or facilities or trails. And we can fairly rapidly, when we get there, come up with lots of lists of things and prioritize them in a relatively logical scientific way versus, yeah, we need a lot of stuff over in this corner of the district. That facility really needs something. And that helps us both to budget, but also to make sure we're meeting equity and other goals the district has. So we're not investing entirely in one spot or another.
So what we shared with the bond task force last week was that we've been internally working with this vision. And the vision is really use those guiding documents, our vision action plan, our comp plan, our various functional plans, and the asset inventory information that we've been gathering that can help us prioritize those projects, looking at things like level of service and what is most needed. And our goal is to meet the community's needs. So they've talked about the vision, what they want to see, things like covered play areas and water play and more activities to do with their four-legged family members. And so we want to meet those needs, but we also need to balance the environmental and financial sustainability of the decisions we're making. And so as an example of what that could look like is when we talk about new and replacement, there are things that we can do to take a look at something like our oldest pool, our Beaverton Swim Center, the one-time headquarters of the park district. We could look at something like that. That would not be a new project, but we could drastically improve what takes space on that property and potentially, as a nod to that vision, look at different ways that people want to play in water. And it may not be an L-shaped pool anymore. It may be something with a whirlpool or a little lazy river type resistance opportunity. We have the opportunity to do something different in our existing spaces that won't dramatically enhance the need for maintenance down the road. It's in that space, but it feels new to the community and it meets their needs now versus when it was built in the mid 1950s. So that is what we're using as our vision, guiding this process. We shared this statement with the task force, didn't get dramatic engagement. I think, we'd hit them with all those pictures and that, kind of bums you out. But this is a vision that we want to get your feedback. If there were any sort of work session element of this, if you wanted to share those thoughts with us, we'd love to hear them. But speaking of that bond task force, we did meet with them for the first time, had our kickoff last week. We have 13 members. I believe were all there. Stayed awake through the whole thing, which was fantastic. And we talked about a bunch of really important things. We talked about the source of our funding, where our money in the budget is spent. So we gave them that great overview. We did it similarly with the levy task force. We talked about the pressures on that capital budget and the real importance of looking at this as the critical tool to get so much of that unmet capital need addressed. We do have 3 more meetings that we're going to have with them. Our next one's on the 25th, and we're going to share more information with them about the categories we're considering for this future bond. And then in future meetings, we'll also talk with them about findings for the polling that we're doing, which I believe kicked off today. And so we're excited about this. They were all very appreciative of the information that we shared. We've got some incredible talent. We've got folks from our advisory committees. We've got folks who have done this work elsewhere for other entities and governmental agencies. So we're going to get some wonderful feedback from this group. We did not ask them to give us any thoughts on these questions that day. We shared that we really, at the end of our process and our 4 nights together, we'd really love them to start thinking about these questions. And they are, should the board refer a replacement bond request to voters in May of 26? What is that right mix between new projects and replacement projects? And then do we have the proposed categories and the project mix within those categories right? And so we'll be providing them more information about that and seeking their feedback and then bringing that back to you. So that is our presentation, just under the wire. We have time for questions if you'd like. But we hope this gives you a good image of what we're working on right now.
Did have a question, just a quick comment. I do like the vision for the replacement bond.
Thank you.
So just wanted to give that affirmation.
Thank you.
I had a question. So when we did the operational levy, we also got the other side of if it doesn't pass, these are the things we're going to lose. These are the things we're going to have to let go and cut hours. What happens if this doesn't pass? Do we have a?
That's a great question. What could happen is that we're not able to perform all the repairs. We may have to make tough choices and prioritize some facilities over others. So it could very much result in facilities we can't open because we can't fund the repairs that are needed in those spaces. It could mean, fewer hours at different places. It could mean if, we get to a play equipment that has a piece that breaks and it's 30 years old and we can't get a replacement part and we can't make that safe, then that will have to be decommissioned.
Gotcha.
So there's real outcomes that could happen from not being able to keep these spaces safe for folks.
And then how does that play into our marketing game plan of that? Because that was our main flyer, right?
Mhm.
Like we're gonna lose childcare and bathrooms and
Yeah.
what does that
Yeah.
look like?
Maybe Holly could help us
Yeah.
with that too.
Yeah.
So our poll is in the field right now, and that is one of the questions we talk about. So we have a section where we're talking about the whys. This is important, and we're testing people's support or thoughts around those points. And one of the points, and we borrowed it from the Portland Parks bond as well. Our language is very similar, but it talks about how do you feel about closing facilities if we can't make them. And I will say, you can sense it in Aisha. There's such a proud, these professionals have heart for how they take care of the facilities and the amenities. But the reality of it is, it's a 20-year bond to pay for $300 million plus in capital needs that are needed. And we need to be able to clearly communicate if it does not pass, some trails are going to get closed, some park amenities are going to close, and ultimately over the 20 years, some of our facilities are going to fail, and we're going to have to look at what that means and what those closures look like. And we've got to get comfortable with that discomfort of communicating that because it's the truth, right? We have to be authentic and tell people the real impact of these choices.
I'll just offer quickly appreciation. I think we learned a lot with Levy, and I recognize this is not same, but just continued appreciation for the way in which you're bringing us along on the journey. It feels incredibly informative, collaborative, and not as overwhelming perhaps and as quickly as what we did just a moment ago. And when I hear you say like, we've not done this in 20 years, there may be some of y'all who, I don't know, Mr. Minke, but I just, such gratitude and so important. And I will continue and echo just one other comment. And I know you've got the gavel. Thank you for storytelling because I do think that's what's most important. So I will beat that drum. Thank you.
All right.
I'll just say yes, all this information is great. In my head, I think of tactfully showing people examples of when things are a little more sideways in Parks District, Parks agencies. People take a lot of pride in this park district. It's why we exist. And so I think this is all great. Thank you for all your work. I don't think I'm supposed to hit the gavel. I'm going to do it anyway. We're going to close that work session. And then I'm going to hit it twice and we're going to open the executive session. Okay.